Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. The only podcast where it's okay to talk in band. On this podcast, you will be able to hear conversations with some of the greatest names in wind band conducting, composing, and arranging. We'll also visit with great college, high school, middle school, and elementary band directors to get their thoughts on various aspects of being a band director. We'll have regular check-ins with instrument specialists, music dealers, and instrument repair professionals. And if that's not enough, we'll even have regular conversations with Dr. Tim, who will help keep us motivated. That's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. And now, here's Charlie.
Welcome to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, and this, my 54th podcast, and number 15 in my second season. I am so happy that you are joining me for this great conversation. Well, today you're going to hear part 2 of my conversation with Greg Bimm, the director of bands at Marian Catholic High School in Chicago Heights, Illinois. Hopefully you had a chance to listen to part 1 and learn about where Greg grew up, the incredible influence his high school band director had on him, and the important lessons he learned while student teaching. Greg also spoke about the band program when he took over at Marian Catholic 44 years ago and chatted a bit about how the program grew and developed. What I found most interesting was the philosophy Greg shared, especially about his desire to always have his students perform at their best, even when the outcome maybe wasn't what they had hoped. It is a real lesson for all of us, and for Greg, that served as a litmus test that affirmed his philosophy was working. If you've not listened to part 1, please do so. And if you have, then I will bring you part 2 right after this from my friend Drew at thepodcastingstore.com.
This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning, and a proud sponsor of Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Listen to what we've been working on in this clip from our podcast. I wanted to talk about something a little different today. If you only know me from the podcasting store, then you're only getting part of the story. The podcasting store is our electronics and broadcast equipment part of the company, but the other company that we have is Bimm Music Company here in Fort Collins, Colorado. And as part of what we do with that, which is all band and orchestra, I've been volunteering lately at a middle school with their beginners and saw that there was a really big need for reinforcing the basic lessons. So over on the Bimm Music Company YouTube channel, we have created a series of absolute beginners videos. These are short videos that reinforce what the beginner has already learned in class, but may not have fully absorbed. And the goal is to minimize lost practice time between classes so the player can maintain enthusiasm and learn faster. And so the first couple of lessons are going to involve things like opening the case, assembling the instrument, lubrication, and stuff like that. So we're adding more videos to that series all the time, but this could be a valuable resource for those of you who are teaching beginners. So go to the Bimm Music Company YouTube channel. Please subscribe, of course, and check that out. And if that could be of value to you, please use them in whatever way you see fit. Please visit thepodcastingstore.com, your one-stop shop for everything podcasting and remote learning. This is Drew with thepodcastingstore.com. Now back to Charlie.
One last question about marching band. Then we're going to talk about the other part of your program, which so many people don't get a chance to see, and that's the incredible concert band program you have at Marian. So here goes this last question. It just seems like today, there are high schools around the nation that are spending more money than it's just almost obscene amounts of money, upwards of $300,000, $400,000, $500,000 a year to field a marching band. They do a competition marching band show, and they're buying their drill and their music and their instructors and their travel and their props and their trucks and probably 747s and everything possible. And I know that Marian Catholic does not spend that kind of money. They don't have that kind of money. They don't have that kind of capacity to do that. You probably could find a way to do it if you wanted to, but I don't think that's part of your DNA. but you still field an incredible product. And so my question, though, is at what point does the amount of money that some groups are spending simply become too much and that the ends just can't justify the means?
That's a tough question because there are a number of different things to talk about. For every school, you have to find your own balance point. I have looked at your estimation of $500,000. That is a real number. That is a number that people are spending. We at Marian, I can't. A lot of people, the fees to be in the marching band is $1,300, $1,400 a year, and with our tuition, we can't. There's no way for us to charge that kind of a fee to be in the marching band. I wouldn't. We'd have a marching band of about 3, I think, and so that's not in our realm. We have an instrument endowment fund that we started 20 years ago that people have been donating to, and the whole idea of the endowment is you spend the interest, but you don't touch the principal. Well, the amount of money that we have as principal in that endowment fund is less than those bands spend in a year on their marching band. So we live in financially a very different place than they do. Now, whether the rightness or wrongness, for each individual school, and when you're past the point is mechanically, it's from a balance point. I've checked out some. Every once in a while, I'll look at one of the schools that's being very successful, and I'll just check the housing prices that surround that school. And often there's a tail of the tape there, where the cost of housing is just compared to here in Chicago Heights is incredibly high. And so the community is built around some of the schools in such a way that they can afford to do that without flipping the balances of what the community can afford. And so to a degree, they have resources that they can use for their students. Whether it's right to do that or not is a whole different thing. Or what is right for each school is a whole different thing. I need to be careful. I don't want to paint anybody in a bad picture because of how their bands work. I don't want to do that. But one of the things that it does do is it creates a difficult playing field. If you can spend $500,000 on your fall season, it's much easier to get all of the things in place that will help you to be successful than if you have far less money. If you're making your own and painting your own props, or within your staff, there are just 3 or 4 people and they're doing all of the choreography and stuff like that. That's a very different thing from having a large staff of people who are teaching, along with a large staff of creators. And so I think that can be stretched into everything. Electronics, how much can you spend on electronics? It's thousands and thousands of dollars. And if you have enough money, you can buy systems that can at least help you to sound better. In some cases, there are people who have used wireless mics with numbers of students in the band and mixed that into the overall sound. At least I understand there have been. There are people who have enough money that they can hire high-end professional sound people to run their sound systems. And so that can create, I hate to use the phrase uneven playing field, because there's a lot of baggage that goes with that term. But it's a difficult thing to manage, I think. And I think it's something that everybody has to pursue in their own philosophy. I don't think that's going to be the perfect answer. However, there are going to be people who will spend whatever they can, and there will be people who will spend what they shouldn't spend. There'll be people who try to match that same spending in a community that can't afford it, and that's always a recipe for an early end to a program, I guess. So I don't know that answers anything. It's a very complicated
process. It's a great answer. It's a great answer to a question, to the question. I mean, and maybe, I thought about this, at some point, maybe its contest should have there's a 4-minute component to the contest where every band has this, gets the same chart, gets the same drill, gets the exact same instrumentation numbers, gets the exact, this is what you can use. This is what you do. Now go out and learn it and perform it and play it. And then we'll do some judging there, person to person.
If you want to make it interesting, you would make it so that the instrumentation that the personnel that you use is randomly selected from your instrumentation. So if you've got 36 clarinets and you can only use 12, it's a random draw of which 12 you're going to use. I have a story to tell, and this is not about band, but it's about choir. A number of years ago, Alicia Lambert, Bobby Lambert's wife, is an amazing choral director and just super talented. She was the choir director at Lincoln Way East High School and had an amazing group of madrigal singers, just off the charts good. And they had been scheduled to perform in a clinic at IMEA down in Peoria. Well, as IMEA approached, the weather got terrible. And on the day that the choir was supposed to bus to Peoria, big snows happened. And the administration said, you can't go. Those kids we can't chance it on the road. Well, Alicia was already in Peoria, and because the thing started earlier, and some of her kids were already there. There were a couple of students that were in the all-state choir, and there were some siblings of those students who went down early because their family was going down. Bottom line is, she had like 2 people on a part or 1 person on a part. It was just this really small group. And so IMEA said, we can reschedule this and you can do it next year. And Alicia said, no, we'll do it. And so she didn't get a chance to choose which of those kids were, like which one of us would want to do that. And we were joking about it a minute ago. That's exactly the situation that she was given. Like, okay, we've got the parts covered, but I don't get to choose who's covering them. And she performed the clinic anyway. And, for me, I'm just like, that's my hero. The program is the kids are that well prepared and that well taught. That's pretty amazing. And that was a true test.
Yeah. How's your time, Greg? Because I got a few more questions I want to go through.
I'm fine. I don't have any, I've got
I'm loving this. This is so awesome. So we're going to shift gears. What so many people don't know is that the real core of the program at Marian is your terrific concert band program. Talk a little bit about how many ensembles you have and the philosophy of that.
We really have 3 concert bands, and we've had 4 at times when the program gets really big. Marian is getting quite small now, and so the numbers are not the same as they used to be. But essentially, the Marian program was built around 3 concert bands. One is the symphonic band, which is as selective as we can be. I say that because some sections are incredibly selective, and some are, you can play the oboe, you get to sit here. That's not the most competitive section we have generally. A couple of years it was, but for the most part, not. But it's a very selective, specifically instrumented group. Like the instrumentation is, very specific with only mild variations, like whether we have 5 flutes or 6 flutes one year, whether we have 10 clarinets or 12 or 9. It depends on where the break points are and how the whole program looks. But the symphonic band is the main focus and is the example for the rest of the program. Second group is called the concert band, and it varies depending on the size of the program. It's been as big as 120, I think. And actually, when it got to be so big, we actually split a group off from there, because the performance level is very diverse in that group. Like the top end kids are kids who are one position away from symphonic band, and the bottom end are kids who are they love being in band, but they're not great players by any stretch. And so for a while we split a band from that, so we could meet those more challenged kids at their level. The third band in general it's called the cadet band. It's all the freshmen. And we have kept the freshman band together. Now there's a little caveat to that I'll tell you in a second, but because I want them to grow together as people. I want them to play together and share music together as people, because they're going to be a class that goes through school. At some point, they're going to be our senior leaders. And so the cadet band, we keep together. Now, because of the school has kind of kept the schedule where the cadet band has their study hall during our full band time. Both symphonic and concert band meet the same period, because we have two directors, so we can do that. The cadet band has study hall. So cadet band students will play in the cadet band, but they can also opt to play in upper level bands if they're advanced enough to play. And so essentially we have three bands. The cadet band is built to take kids from wherever they are. And that's a very diverse group, because we have kids who are absolute beginners. I mean, like who've never played an instrument before, they're in that band. Some kids who've played for 4 years, but I wish they hadn't. Because they come in with interesting habits, or interesting perceptions. And so we have to kind of rewind that. But I keep the whole band together, because the better players at the top end of the section can be a great influence on the more challenged younger players. And so the cadet band is the freshman band that is built about moving the kids along as far as we can in a given year.
Is there a core repertoire that you want your band members to experience during their high school time?
I don't have a list, like I don't. I know there are some people who have a rotating list. If you really want the kids to have to play, say, one of my favorite pieces is the Persichetti Symphony. If I wanted all of the kids to get a chance to play the Persichetti Symphony, I would have to do it once every 4 years. And I don't know. I've never bought into that as a thing, because then I would have essentially 4 corner mark pieces. Well, 8, because we do 2 different concert sets generally in a year with major works on both. But I don't know that limitation is right. Basically, we choose literature based on who's there, based on who the players are and what their strengths and weaknesses are. There is core repertoire that I constantly go back to. I'm not I don't solely pursue the newest thing, like there are a lot of folks I think that are always looking for the newest thing, and that's all they look for. And I love to find new pieces. We just did Come Sunday, a few weeks ago. And I love discovering new stuff like that. But there's still the Persichetti Symphony and Lincolnshire Posy and the Hindemith Symphony and Hammersmith and any number of things, emblems. There are a lot of pieces that I really like to work with, and they're great musical experiences for the kids. Music for Prague. Sometimes it takes the kids have to find their way into them before they get all out of the music that they can. But there are centerpieces that I've played numerous times. I think I'm not sure how many times I've done Persichetti, maybe 5.
Yeah, it's a great piece. So when you pass a piece of music out to your kids for the first time, what kind of preliminary information do you give them? And then do you try to read it straight through, or do you play various excerpts throughout to kind of give them this is where it's going, or how to get the bigger picture like that? Talk about that first read.
Everything it's different based on whatever we're playing. if we played Tears a couple of years ago, and I spent a long time talking to them. Well, I shouldn't say a long time, but I spent time talking to them about what the piece was about and a little bit about its background, and then talk to them about Maslanka and let them hear some other things of Maslanka, you know, Child's Garden of Dreams, stuff like that, just so they knew kind of the sound that they were looking at. When we did Music for Prague, actually the kids knew that one for whatever reason. They, you know, I set them up because I talked about it as a great piece, I think the year before. And so they kind of had, the last time we did it, they kind of had an impression that it was great. And one of the first times we did Music for Prague, I wanted them to understand what it was about. And so I set them up in a different way. We started fifth hour, and before we did, I had a young man he's a bassoon player, and I think he was band president, and a really nice guy, a really good guy, and everybody respected him. He's a good student, and he was a dedicated band person. And I talked to him and said, "I'm going to throw you out of band today." And he just looked at me, and I said, "I'm just going to say, get out, get out. And when I say that to you, I want you to walk out into the hallway and just stay there. And when anybody comes out to the hallway after you, tell them not to worry, that it's just an experience for the band." And so the band period started, and I dreamt up some excuse to yell at this guy. And I just started pounding away at him, you know, making it just, and it was uncharacteristic for me. It was pretty heavy. And I said, "If that's who you are, just get out." And so I threw him out of the band. And then I looked around and I found anybody that was wincing the wrong way. And I picked about 4 more section leader people, like top end people, and just said, you think this is wrong? You get out too. And so I threw about 5 or 6 of the kids out. And by the time I was done, the rest of the band was just sitting. You could tell they were quaking, like, who is he going to pick on next? Who is, you know, what? But not one person raised their hand. Not one person tried to get out of there was nothing. They just sat there completely, you know, like a deer in headlights. And then I said, what I just did was exactly what happened in 1969 in Prague. The communists came in and they lopped off the head of all the leaders of society, essentially. They basically took this place over, got rid of any kind of potential leadership, and made it so that everybody that was left was afraid that they would be the next one to go. And so we just talked about what had happened and what that situation was like. And then we talked about Karel Husa and his experience, seeing that from a place that he could have no effect, and how he reacted musically to that.
That's wonderful. What a great story. You know, there's a great story that goes along with when Husa received his Pulitzer Prize. You know, he was teaching at the time at Ithaca. No, he wasn't at Ithaca. He was at, where in the hell was Husa?
Yeah, he was.
He was at Ithaca. And his wife was home, and she got this phone call about the fact that he had received this award, and she didn't know what it was. And she hung up on him like 3 times. It was the Pulitzer Foundation letting him know that he won the Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah, he called and tried to sell us a vacuum cleaner. The Pulitzer company.
Your car warranty is expired. Yeah. So tell us about the process you go through when you are learning a piece of music for the first time. I mean, you have a set process for score study, or does it change upon the work?
It changes with everything, you know. Yeah. And I can't. It's kind of immersion, I guess. You know, it starts big. You know, I'll just thumb through things and look and see what's there, so I can kind of get a big picture of the overall lay of the land. One of my complaints about music history in college, when I went to ISU, was they started talking about particulars immediately. And I had no background in any of this stuff. And so instead of having a skeleton, you know, like this is the classical period, this is the Baroque period, and this is where they happen, and these are the general people who were in these, instead of setting up and saying, this is the framework, now we're going to fill in the framework, they just started with the fill-ins. Mm-hmm. So it made no sense to me. And so a lot of times it just starts big, where I'm just going to scope my way through stuff. But then I sort of follow however it leads me. I will go through and do an outline, just like, okay, how does this flow? Like, what's the overall time frame? Like, how are things happening? How many measures in this section? And I'll do stuff like that. I'll go through and try to find out the building blocks. What's there? What are the themes? How do they interact? I don't do the thing where you color all the lines and stuff. There are people that do that and they find it very helpful. But that's not for me, or at least it doesn't work for me. And so it's sort of a matter of continual, how many times can I walk through this? And in some cases, it's just a matter of looking for things that are going to be problems. Like, okay, are there, who's playing here? What range are they playing in? I'm trying to remember. I think it, like an incantation in dance, when the flutes are playing and the low register is so soft, likely they're going to be playing on the bottom side of the pitch. And when any kind of single reed players come in, they're going to be on the top side of the pitch. And so I'll look for things.
Get the alto flutes out.
Yeah. And so, I'll look for things like that and try to make sure that I know that that's going to come up. Sometimes I'll do that even later as we're approaching rehearsals to make sure that I find all of the things. But it really is a matter of living with the piece enough so that I understand as much as I can everything that's there. And I try to find why it's there, and sometimes I think I may make things up. I know a few years ago, I was writing an arrangement for marching band of Frank Kelly's Rest. And
you had his permission, of course.
Yes.
Let's get that out there.
It was absolutely above board with permission. I know
you would never do that, but I want to make sure our listeners know that
back in the day, way back in the day, like the early 80s, there was a whole different world going on. But yeah, I don't even get close to that, and so it was with permission. And I looked at the first 4 notes, and it's a rising whole step sequence. Mm-hmm. And in my mind, when I saw that, I immediately thought of this Bach chorale that I had to analyze in college called Es ist genug, which means it is enough. And I thought for sure that Kelly just chose that as the way to start, because if you're thinking rest, it is enough. There's a real strong parallel there. And I ended up, writing him on, just sending a message on Facebook, and he said, no, that was not part of my thinking at all. But in my mind, it was, and so I still used it. I mean, when I talk to people about it, that still registers to me. And so I will look for every little part that I can of what's meaningful. And I will sing through it, but I'll often whistle through the score, because I can, sometimes it's just a little bit more comfortable to whistle. I don't know, but sing through individual lines. Mm-hmm. I will try to find its core, and all of this is pretty generic, or general. But every piece is a little bit different, or maybe in some cases a lot different. And the part of that process is also trying to find its center, like why things flow and how they should flow, how the notes should move from one to the next, and what the real speed should be. A lot of times composers will, while they'll use general terms for velocity, like there was just a thing on Facebook about, I think it was John Mackey, who was talking about how much he should mark his score with how he felt phrases should flow. And I don't know that there's any way that you can mark a score so perfectly that it's going to flow exactly the way that it is in your mind. And then even if it does, that might not be the perfect flow for your ensemble where they're playing, and so I'll spend a lot of time thinking about the insides and why things should flow and how they should flow. I've seen a couple of times where people who have been very, very successful as band directors will have underestimated a piece. Like they will conduct it and it'll be nice and it'll sound great because the players all can play, but they didn't really get all of the meat. It's sort of like hitting the golf ball. When you kind of miss the golf ball, you don't get it all. And so they didn't quite get it. In my opinion, they didn't get it all. And I've also seen some times when somebody just hits the ball out of the park. And whether it's a big piece, like a significant work, like First Suite in E flat at Midwest a couple of years ago with Bob Reynolds. Oh my God, that was an absolute home run. I mean, like everything felt so correct to me. Even the space between movements felt like measured and thought out. He absolutely had a complete control of what he wanted that group to do in that place at that time. It was marvelous. I heard at a convention, I think it was an ABA convention, a number of years ago, Mark Kelly conducted Banks and Brays, and it was perfect. I mean, absolutely perfect from the standpoint. He just put it exactly in its right speed, and all the phrases sang exactly the way they were supposed to. And the 16th note lead in bottom, he put just enough weight on that and let it be just long enough so that it didn't feel rushed like it so often does. And I saw him in the elevator afterwards and just thanked him. I said, man, that was definitive today. And so that's my goal. When I'm trying to do something, whatever the piece is to try to get it all. I don't know that I ever do, but I always try. So
I'm talking to a former student of mine yesterday who he was a percussionist. He still plays. He's a strategist for a creative public relations firm, and he said, I've come to the realization that trying to really put my arms around music is like counting to infinity. And he said, every day I'm farther from where I started and I'm no closer to getting to where I need to get to.
Yeah. One of the things that frightens me is sometimes I talk with people or I see people who are so invested in the perfection, like every note in its exact right place. And, when they hear a group that plays where you can't find a flaw, like a specific objective flaw, they think that's it. That's the deal. And
I had an argument with one of our colleagues who was going to remain nameless many years ago after a performance I heard I'm not going to mention the piece even. Well, no, I'm going to mention the piece. It was Lincolnshire Posy, and this group came on and they played it. And I thought it was the most sterile thing I've ever heard in my entire life. And our colleague goes, oh my God, that was the most wonderful performance. He said, they just played that thing perfectly. And I said, if you read the liner notes of what Fennell talked about, that these were a bunch of musical wildflowers. And I said, if you've ever gone out and picked wildflowers, inevitably there's going to be a weed or two, right? I mean, that's part of it being wildflowers. So you're right. You're so right, Greg, that there's going to be some imperfection, and that's part of the art. Art isn't perfect.
And that happens also in marching band. Like my belief is that we should be as musical in marching band. And that to me is a bit of a lost art. I remember way back in the day, back in the 80s, after Gary Green, left U High and was out on the East Coast, he was still doing a lot of marching band judging. And we'd play a phrase and he'd just go gaga about the phrase because we've taken the time, and not not the obvious objective shaping that so many people do. It was a phrase that sang, and he just, praised that to the highest heavens. And that's not a thing that's recognized so much anymore. And it's becoming the same. I don't know. It's becoming. Maybe that's too much of a condemnation. It is the same danger that happens with concert bands, where you're trying to be so perfect that you have you've bleached the soul out of the music. You've bleached its musical heart out.
Bob Reynolds said when I interviewed him last year for the podcast, he said band directors don't look at a piece of music as music. They look at it as a series of obstacles that have to be overcome.
Actually, that's very well said. And that, to a degree, you can see why we get dragged into that, because, when you're standing in front of your band, there are, we have to be able to accomplish this. We have to make sure we can accomplish this. We have to make sure we can accomplish this. But that's just the beginning. The real part of it is, why are you trying to accomplish that? Why are you trying to make all that happen so that you can make good music? And a lot of times the good music side, or just the simple music side, gets forgotten or put on a back burner.
Yeah.
So,
you play recordings of music for your kids? Recordings of pieces?
Yes. Yeah. I used to be afraid to do that. Like, there was the thought that, if you listen to a recording as you're preparing, then you're going to be infected by whoever the person was, by their interpretation. And it's the same thing with having the kids listen. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that. The example that I've given the kids recently, I'll tell them, go out and find recordings. Here are three versions of the Persichetti Symphony. Listen to these three, and then find another one. Just look for something else out there and see what you hear. And you can listen for the differences, or just enjoy it from a bunch of different standpoints. And one of the things that I is a rationale for me that I stumbled on, just, perusing in my head, was the Chicago Symphony, when they're going to play Mahler, Mahler 5, they don't go in there not knowing what it's going to be. They don't go in there to play Mahler 5 like they've never heard it before. They've heard it a gazillion times. They go in with a perception of what they believe it's going to be, and then the conductor will finalize that. You know what I mean? But they know going in, like, you can't go in, if you're playing the Chicago Symphony, you can't go in there and not know, not just the notes on your part, you have to know how it all fits together. And so, I mean, even to a very, very small degree, I talked to, Chris Martin one time, and he came down to Marian to do a clinic for our trumpet players. That was pretty cool. And one of our kids asked him how he plays E on the trumpet, and specifically fourth space E. And he said, well, sometimes I play it open, sometimes I play it 1 and 2, sometimes I play it 3. And he said, the choice becomes specifically the situation, like where it is in whatever chord it's going to be, or who I'm playing with. He said, sometimes if I'm playing, I don't know that I have his exact thing right, but he said, if I'm playing with an oboe, I might use a specific fingering because it has a slightly different tone than playing it open. And so, if you know the score to that degree, it's, you've heard it before. And so playing recordings, if I had a recording of Bob Reynolds conducting First Suite in E flat at Midwest, and if we were going to play First Suite, I want my kids to hear that. This is one of the ideal versions, in my opinion, of this piece. Yeah. And so I do play recordings for the kids, absolutely, and that's I ask them to listen outside of rehearsal.
So speaking of recordings, I remember talking to Dr. Bejan after he retired. And he told me that he recorded every one of his rehearsals and would listen to them before the next rehearsal. And I was thinking, like, that's kind of like a coach does. They study game films all the time. They're always studying films and that. Do you record your rehearsals? And if so, when you listen to recording, what level of specificity are you focusing on? Are you thinking wrong notes, intonation, style, shape, form, intent?
Both. And I don't record every recording. Usually we'll get very far along in the process before I start to do that. And when I do listen to recordings, I'll write notes for the band, but the notes often will be, 6-7 pages of notes, like in measure 110, this, watch this, in measure the listen to the pitch here when you listen to the recording, that kind of stuff. But also I'll listen to it from the standpoint of hearing what other people are going to hear, because when you're involved in the music making, it's pretty easy to miss what the audience is experiencing, which is a thing about programming too, I guess. But I remember when I was first teaching, before I went to Western, we had played a September Song, an arrangement for concert band of September Song came out. And I squeezed every bit of beautiful stuff out of that I possibly could. Like I refer to it as bathing in each chord. And I remember after we played it, one of the teachers that heard the band play came up and said, that was very pretty. He said, it was hard to hear the melody though, because it was going so slow. And I was just, and I've heard people do that with Irish tune, where it's so beautifully written that they'll go at a snail's pace to just savor each note.
And the second movement of Lincolnshire, right? Hark Still Grange.
Yep.
You read the text to it. It ain't that slow. I mean, yeah, absolutely. Okay, a couple more questions because I know you got to go teach.
Sure.
And, you're one of the senior statesmen of the band world now, whether you want to be or not. I think that happens by default, by the way, as we get old.
Absolutely.
And as Bob Reynolds says, our goal is to live forever. And right now we're doing a pretty damn good job of it. So, but like the old commercial E.F. Hutton, when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen. There's the thing like that. So if you could give directors some advice about how they should be approaching music with their students, what would it be?
There are so many temptations in what we do that it's really easy to pull away from the core of what we should be doing. And there are two parts in my opinion. One is helping the students to have the best musical experience that they can. They get a chance to experience music on a very personal level while they're in the band. And the goal first is for those kids to have the best possible band music experience during the time that you're with them. And that can get to be covered by all of the other strange things that happen. Before we started this podcast, I got 3 emails this morning, one from the president of our school, one from the principal of our school, and one from our uniform representative. And all 3 were things that are going to cause me to use more time today than I thought I was going to use to respond and to make sure that all 3 of those things are on the right track. And our lives get full of that. And so we get tempted to shortcut, or we get tempted to do other things, and they get in the way of remembering that the students are at the core of what we do. And the second part is how precious and central to our existence our band music is. You want to make sure that the students are at the very center, but a close second to that is the pursuit of the highest level of artistic music that you can make with the students that you have in your specific situation. And all of that is it's a long-term commitment, and it's the driving factor for what we do. It's, when I get up in the morning and go off to school, that's why I'm going off to school, because I get a chance to make music. And this year was really hard because we didn't get as many chances to make music, but I get a chance to share music with those kids and get a chance to pursue this music that is so very, very precious. It takes a lot of hard work to do. And so you can be seduced into doing less. Sometimes you do less because whatever reason, you get strange letters that you have to answer from the principal or the president or something, or you do less because you're protecting yourself from the supposed, you're protecting yourself in your mind from burnout. I've been teaching for a long time, and I haven't ever experienced burnout. Like I don't, when people talk about that, I don't know what it is. So I guess I just sort of took an aside there. Sorry, but
no, that's right on the money. So you created more than a band program at Marian. I hope you know that, buddy. And after 44 years, you got a lot of kids that are running around with that Marian Catholic tattoo on their heart and soul, and remains with those kids for the rest of their lives. So describe, if you can, the culture you've worked to create within the Marian Catholic High School band program.
It's obviously from the aspect of music, we hopefully learn to love music. Some of my favorite memories or favorite instances are when somebody will write back and say, I was in the airport and I heard Appalachian Spring, and if Bobby Lambert is listening to this, Appalachian Spring, sorry. But they'll write back and say that they heard this and it reminded them of something, and they're so glad that they learned this when they were in high school. That's really important. But on a much greater level, it's more about being great human beings. One of the things that we talk about is it's actually on a couple of different levels, but one is we talk about personal responsibility. Our acronym for band in our band is PRIDE, personal responsibility and daily effort. And when you break that down, you can come up with some pretty profound messages and thoughts. But we talk about being personally responsible to yourself, to your friends, to the band. Just one of the stories that we talk about is also one of everybody being equal, everybody being equally deserving and equally deserving of respect. I'll roll this way back. This is going to take me just a couple of minutes to say, but when I first started teaching at Marian, I was by myself. I hadn't gotten married yet. I lived above a garage. And so there was really no reason for me to go home. So I stayed at school all the time. Basically, I'd finish teaching lessons after school. I'd go down and get dinner at this little place called Marnell's. It was, the same dinner every night, pretty much, a sausage or Italian beef or something. Then I'd go to that music store that I mentioned earlier, Musart, and he had band music. And so I'd just sit and read scores. Well, after I read scores, at 9 o'clock, Dean would come in and say, Greg, got to leave, man. I got to close. And so I'd drive back to school and hang out in the band room for a while. So at 9 o'clock, I'd be in the band room, and the night maintenance guy was a guy named Lee Porter. And Lee would come in with his vacuum cleaner, and we'd have a short conversation. And he would vacuum the band room floor, and often I'd play my trumpet along with him, because if I remember, the vacuum cleaner was in E flat or B flat. I can't remember which one, but basically I'd play along with him. And so we were friends, just from those moments at night. But the Lee Porter story that I tell the kids every year is this. In 1984, they were doing a building project at the school, and one of the construction workers went into a little, basically it's a little phone room, like the ticket office by the theater. Nothing was in there. It was just a chair and a floor, and then there was a window. There was the ticket window, and So there was nothing in there, but the maintenance, or not the maintenance, the construction worker decided that would be an adequate place to use as a bathroom. And not just a normal bathroom, but like the harshest kind of bathroom that you can think. And so he just did that in there and then left. And I remember, it's my ringtone.
Love it.
Okay, I'll call them back. I'm going to go over there. I remember that it was discovered that went on, and our head of maintenance, there it goes. Our head of maintenance just called out to Mr. Porter and said, Lee, clean this stuff up, will you? And I just remember that, thinking of how awful that was. And my students and I talk about that every year. Like, that is one of the first things that I tell them, because the philosophy of the construction worker was such that he could leave that awful mess, and it was okay that someone else would have to clean up for him. Like, he was superior to whoever the cleanup person was. He somehow existed in a place where that was okay, that was justified. And we talk about other examples of this same thing. You know, on an innocent example, any student who comes in to the band room with a root beer from, you know, wherever, from Arby's, and then leaves the root beer cup by their stand or on a table or something like that and doesn't clean up, that's the same philosophy. It's not nearly as messy, but it's the same philosophy that says, I can leave this here and somebody who is less than me will pick it up. And so we talk about how important it is to consider everyone that surrounds you. And that's a central part of who we are. And if you start to extend that, you can extend it in all ways. You can extend it into society and slavery. You can extend it into music. You know, if you're in a band and you don't practice your part, you expect somebody else to play the part instead. That's the same philosophy. You're saying that I don't have to practice my part because Billy's going to practice his part, and so I can just ride on Billy's coattails. And that's much more innocent than the slavery side. But we'll look at the whole thing, you know, because on one hand, it's really easy to see how evil some of that is, leaving the mess in the ticket office or slavery or whatever. But it's the same philosophy that gets pushed into leaving a mess behind, whether it's, you know, you come in and leave your hamburger papers behind, or you're working on the football field and you leave your water bottles behind, or you have a sectional in a classroom and you don't straighten the chairs. The band is playing and you haven't practiced your part. All of that it's the same philosophy. And so that's the center focus, I think, of that expands out through the whole program.
Yeah, our buddy Tim Watson always says, you know, like, how you do one thing is how you do everything, right? You give it your very, very best, right? And it just speaks volumes about it. That's wonderful. I mean, I just love that. Okay, so had you not become a band director, what would Greg Bimm be doing today?
I'd be trying to figure out how to become a band director. I honestly, I have no idea. You know, there are things that I do, you know, like I've always been really good at math. You know, math just makes sense to me. So I could probably do something in a math field, but if I was, I'd still be playing somewhere. But I've never thought about being anything else. Maybe when I was a little boy, you know, thinking about being Superman or something. But in all of my memory, I can't remember ever thinking anything about being anything other than a high school band director, which is interesting because I've never considered being a college band director, you know, or at least I've never thought about pursuing that. I've had a couple of people talk to me and say, hey, listen, maybe you can come to so. And at that point, I guess you could say I considered whether, you know, but being a high school band director has been the single thing. And so I'm living the dream.
Well, you've hit the bullseye, buddy, and you repeatedly hit the bullseye. You got any final thoughts you want to share before you wrap this thing up?
Just thank you. This has been really fun. I guess, part of it's age, when you get to a certain age, you really like talking, and so having a chance to talk for a little while has been really, really fun. So,
Yeah, this is more than we've talked ever.
yeah, it's been great.
It's been awesome for me. I tell you, this is a great one. It's probably gonna do it in a 2-part podcast because, well, I really want listeners to be able to digest everything because it was great, Greg. I just can't thank you enough, buddy.
Thanks. That's really kind. Thanks.
Okay, here's to 44 more years, man.
Hey, sign me up. Just give me some young legs and I'll go.
Greg Bimm, you're the best. God bless you and your family. Say hi to Connie and my favorite, one of your grandchildren, Charlie. Great name, buddy.
Well, that was my dad's name.
Oh, is that right?
And my grandfather's name.
Great.
They were both. My grandfather was Charles Lee. My dad was Charles Lawrence, and so now Charlie, the new little Charlie, he has just signed up for the trumpet. So he's generation 5 in the Bimm trumpet line.
Oh, that's awesome.
My grandfather, my dad, me, my son, and now Charlie. So 5 generations of Bimm trumpet players.
You going to make them practice an hour and a half a day?
I think times are a little different than there. So if he could be here with me, I could enjoy that. That'd be a fun thing to do.
That's awesome. Greg, thanks a million, buddy.
Thank you. Take care.
Hope to see you soon. There's nothing more fun than to talk band with a band director who gets it. And Greg Bimm gets it. He's a wealth of information, and his philosophy on teaching and making music is as sound as it gets. He's a lifer with 44 years at Marian Catholic, and he's still going as strong as ever. To think, it all started when his dad gave him some extra time every day, usually at lunch and after a long day at work, and together they practiced the trumpet. Spending the time, the extra time, the time necessary to make sure the job is getting done the right way. That's something that Greg Bimm learned from his father, and now it is something Greg is passing on to his students. Thanks for a great 2 hours, Greg, and here's to many, many more years of success. Well, that's Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Special thanks to all my sponsors, Vandercook College of Music, Eastman Music Company, Advantage Network Percussion, Hal Leonard, publisher of the Essential Elements Method for Band, and thepodcastingstore.com. As always, please tell your friends and colleagues about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends, available on Apple Podcasts or wherever you listen to your favorite podcasts. I'll be back next week with another great conversation. So until the next time, this is Charlie Mangini saying, thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. If you would like to send a question to Charlie or have a comment, please send an email to bandtalkcharlie@gmail.com. We hope you will let your colleagues, students, and friends know about Band Talk with Charlie Mangini and friends. Thanks for joining us, and we look forward to being with you again soon.